We're going to cover the, California newlyweds say feds trick wife into ICE detention. And fear not, we're also going to cover the federal judge and his landmark decision as well in defense of the First Amendment. Anyway, deportation threats against demonstrators violates the First Amendment, judge rules. Which, remember, another HasanAbi victory here for all of my fucking dumb naysayers who don't understand that the American Constitution protects citizens and non-citizens alike, and that threatening to deport people once they are on U.S. soil for exercising their First Amendment rights is unconstitutional. It turns out this fucking Reagan-appointed judge also recognized that reality. Turns out I wasn't alone for saying this. Except if you ask every dumb YouTuber who just simply has a reactionary position and doesn't know anything about American politics or is barely fucking literate, they all consistently talked about how, you understand, immigrants don't have the same rights as Americans do in the Constitution. You know, you're wrong. They do. They do. They do. They do. They do. You fucking idiot. They do. So confidently fucking wrong. Remember we were watching the fucking First Amendment, the civil rights lawyer, I think it was like Ari Cohen of fire.org, having to duke it out with dumb fucks in his fucking replies, being like, excuse me, sir, do you know what you're talking about? It's like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. This is my literal livelihood, okay? This is what I do for a fucking living.
Use the threat of deportation to silence campus demonstrators. The judge ruled that the administration's policy of seeking to deport pro-Palestinian students blatantly violates the First Amendment. The judge also found that the deportations were intended to strike fear and punish political speech. ABC News legal contributor, professor at Hofstra Law, James Sample, joins me now for more. James, the judge says non-citizens lawfully in the United States unequivocally have the same rights as the rest of us. How significant is that? And what does it mean for those arrested in these protests?
It's literally not even significant. It's not supposed to be significant. The only reason why this is seen as a landmark decision is because the administration is violating the First Amendment. It's just the law. It's like saying, how significant is it that the police arrested a rapist murderer? It's not significant at all. Except it would be significant if cops were just letting rapist murderers go all the fucking time for some weird reason, and then one cop on accident actually ended up arresting one. Then you'd be like, wow, how significant? It shouldn't be significant at all. It's just called the fucking law. The significance here is that the federal government is not following the letter of the law and the constitutional restrictions.
Diane, it is significant, and that particular aspect of the opinion is just reinforcing what has long been the case. It's not true in every single context, but the First Amendment does apply to individuals who are in the United States, if they are in the United States legally, and these individuals they were on student visas and in situations like that. And what it basically, this particular opinion boils down to, we're talking about an 84-year-old appointee of Ronald Reagan. This is a dyed-in-the-wool judicial conservative who has been around for a long time, and he says that he has never, in this opinion, seen anything like this in terms of government suppression of viewpoint-based speech on the basis of viewpoint. It is a 160-page opinion. It is a tour de force vis-a-vis the First Amendment, and it includes...
Why don't they extend funding till November and Dems win midterms? Am I dumb? What are you talking about, man? They're literally trying to salvage what remains of Medicaid funding. They're doing this for you. They're doing this for the chuds. The do you mean? Also, they're low-key kind of doing this so they can win the midterms, maybe, because like even the Democrats have recognized that their fucking inaction is causing, what is this, Roach talking about permanent residence? Yeah, I mean, I already covered this. I covered this at the time. Yes, this is Asmongold confidently saying something wrong once again, believing that legal permanent residents aren't allowed to believes legal permanent residents aren't allowed to live in America. They're not allowed to say whatever the fuck they want to say. They're not protected by the First Amendment. Anyway, I don't want to fucking talk about Asmongold, okay? Who cares?
Some unusually strong language, particularly from somebody who's been on the bench for that long. This is a victory for the First Amendment. It is a loss for Kristi Noem and for Marco Rubio and the Trump administration, but it is only the beginning of this particular story.
This is one of the most blistering rulings since Trump took office. What sort of precedent could this set?
It is absolutely, Diane, a blistering ruling, and certainly one of the most
like in the history of the United States of America, there have been dark periods where the First Amendment has been violated, okay, by the federal government. McCarthyism is a great example of this. The active threats and the infiltration of like revolutionary black liberation groups, the assassination of black leaders. Like there has the Red Scare period, obviously, Vietnam War protests. Like there have been plenty of instances, right? And as far as like mass surveillance at the domestic level, you have the Patriot Act. Post Patriot Act, you have all the Muslim population dense areas that the American government openly and very deliberately surveilled, and also engaged in like ridiculous detentions. Having said that, up until this moment in American history, it has never been this pervasive and this indefensible, this out in the open. All of those other periods of the erosion of numerous constitutional protections, whether it be search and seizure, whether it be the First Amendment, like all of that has created an opportunity, created an environment for Donald Trump to seize on said opportunity. But I think the point that we've gotten to now is if, and I hope I'm wrong about this, like if Donald Trump gets his wishes across, it will make the Red Scare look like a joke. And that was completely unacceptable. That was unconstitutional. But like what Donald Trump is trying to do right now, if we don't stop it, will make the Red Scare look like a fucking joke. I don't think this is hyperbole. And I say this as someone who would have been impacted during the Red Scare anyway. You know what I mean? If I was who I am right now back then, I would also still be impacted regardless. The reason why I'm saying this is slated to be worse is because although that was also unacceptable and horrifying, this is worse because it's just anything and everything that is political dissent. Not even shit that they've designated as like radical forms of speech, ideas that they think are subversive. Now everything is subversive.
Persuasive, most powerful rebukes of the administration since Trump took office. But it is just a federal district court ruling. The next step involves the discovery process. And the judge said after a 9-day bench trial, he has yet to see evidence that there was any.
Like we're talking about a party that says Chuck Schumer is Antifa, Nancy Pelosi's a communist. Do you understand? Like that's no longer just like thinkers and revolutionary figures, anarchists. We're talking a party that says Nancy Pelosi is a threat is going to be a party that will absolutely choose to just shoot and kill people like me. That's just the way I see it. Like if they consider Jimmy Kimmel to be engaging in speech worthy of the FCC kicking in and censoring, is a party that is not even going to do that to me. They're going to do something so much worse to people like myself.
Basis for the administration to do what it did apart from viewpoint-based discrimination. Essentially, I mean, we're talking about a student at Tufts University, a doctoral student, a woman who wrote an op-ed in the student newspaper at Tufts that took a pro-Palestinian position. If taking that position, whatever one thinks of the position, is problematic to the point of having your visa revoked, the judge says, then that is anathema to everything that the United States stands for. The precedent that this sets will depend on whether or not this ruling is appealed to the First Circuit, and then beyond that to the Supreme Court of the United States. But for now, this is another example of lower courts reining in the Trump administration, even though the Supreme Court has rubber stamped many of the things that he likes to do.
And James, an appeals court is vacating a previous ruling that Trump can't invoke the Alien Enemies Act to deport suspected Tren de Aragua gang members. Now that full court will rehear the case, and it's expected to make it all the way back to the Supreme Court. What are you watching for there?
I think that there's very little question, Diane, that the Supreme Court will have to take this case up again. It took it up on a shadow docket emergency appeal basis earlier in the year and basically punted. It said that individuals are entitled to due process, but the Supreme Court stopped well short of demanding any particular action be taken in an immediate sense. The question of whether the government can simply declare that someone is an alien for purposes of the Alien Enemy Act without due process is about as fundamental to due process as you can get.
All right, ABC News legal contributor James Sample, thank you.
Thank you.
The final question for you is about a ruling that came from a federal district judge who's been on the bench for decades and who was appointed by Ronald Reagan. It's in the case of Ramesa Ozturk and a few other individuals whose allege that their free speech, First Amendment rights as protected by the Constitution were violated by ICE grabbing them because of things they said or wrote. And one of the things he gets to is the masking of ICE agents, which is something that we've seen in New York City, here in Chicago and around. He says, this court has listened carefully to the reason given by Ozturk's captors for masking up. It rejects this testimony as disingenuous, squalid, and dishonorable. ICE goes mass for a single reason, to terrorize Americans into quiescence. It's a federal judge appointed by Reagan. In all our history, we've never tolerated an armed mass secret police. Carrying on in this fashion, ICE brings indelible obloquy to this administration and everyone who works.
Bro, I can't believe I'm saying this, but how the does a Reagan-era federal judge have a better grip on the situation than literally like 85% of the Democratic Party? Like, there are a handful of Democrats that have so eloquently presented what Donald Trump is doing in his attacks against the First Amendment with immigrant apprehensions as a mechanism of immigration enforcement. Actually, I'd go so far as to say that there's like 3 maximum. I wouldn't even say AOC has actually gone this aggressively on this issue. It's like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, and that's kind of it. This is another thing that I have been screaming about from the rooftops over and over again. And I'm so glad that it took a motherfucking Reagan judge to correctly point this out. Using normal people words to get normal people votes. Wait, what? Use normal people? Man, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm not saying you should deploy the term indelible obliquity or however the fuck you say it. Are you stupid? I say it all the time. The Trump administration is cynically framing the conversation against Israel as one that is actually about anti-Semitism and combating anti-Semitism, and they're doing it from the mechanism of immigration enforcement. They're deporting people for talking shit about Israel. That is unconstitutional. That's unconstitutional. The Constitution protects migrants, both documented and undocumented alike, on U.S. soil. A lot of people misunderstand what the Constitution is supposed to do. A better way to frame this is as a restriction on the government. That's what the Constitution is doing. The Constitution is not there to restrict American citizens. It is there to restrict the government from regulating American citizens on certain issues. It protects every single person on U.S. soil unconditionally, okay? Citizens and non-citizens alike. Documented citizens, documented non-citizens, and undocumented non-citizens alike. There's no confusion on this. And yet, for some weird reason, Democrats haven't been saying this. The whole point of the Constitution is to regulate the government, is to restrict the government. And the Trump administration, as I correctly pointed to early on, even before he actually became president, was going to open up the door to eroding First Amendment protections by starting off with migrants that they thought were more vulnerable because people wouldn't defend them, and also attack the issue starting with anti-Semitism, which has a lot of institutional persuasive power, because there are a lot of advocacy groups on the right and also on the left, on the liberal side especially, that have been tasked with quote unquote combating anti-Semitism, which is simply to stop people from saying shit about Israel. Yes, on the liberal side as well, even on the leftist side. There's a reason why there are so many fucking progressive, except for Palestine leftists out there who claim to be leftists, but then, only until recently didn't realize that Israel was an ethno-state doing an apartheid and a genocide. There's a reason, and that is because of the institutional capture of the Zionist lobby and Zionist advocacy groups. That's it. And the Trump administration was very well aware of this, and they realized that that would be the easiest way to open up the door to eroding the First Amendment. This is all laid out, as I have told you time and time again, in Project Esther, which is the First Amendment attack that the Heritage Foundation designed, starting with anti-Semitism, starting with tackling anti-Semitism, which is like anti-Israel sentiment, of course, and then using immigration enforcement, where there's unilateral power in the hands of the fucking state, only to then move on to anti-Christian behavior, for example, or anti-capitalism, as the Trump administration is now designing under new designations as violent rhetoric. Anti-American, anti-capitalist, anti-Christian rhetoric is now considered violent rhetoric. Where the do you think that goes?
Is it at all bracing to read a Reagan-appointed federal district judge write something like that in finding that Ramesa Ozturk's and others' rights were violated?
Of course. I mean, once, as you said, for a Reagan-appointed judge to be out and out talking about secret police in the United States of America in the year 2025 tells us everything about what's going on. And we get to these extremes through these small erasures and steps when everyone says makes an exception here or makes an exception there. And then before you know it, you have masked agents roaming the streets of this country that do not feel entitled to identify themselves or do not feel like as though they answer to the American people at all. That is dangerous. And it is not without saying, it does not go without saying that the people that they went after first are some of the most vulnerable activists in the United States, which is to say pro-Palestinian organizers and young people, especially those who are on green cards or on visas. Yeah. And the idea that we would allow our freedom of speech to be violated and create exceptions to that for people who are advocating for the lives of Palestinians, it erodes at the very core of American identity too. Because this is a land of the free, but only as long as we defend it and make it so. And so we have a responsibility to ensure that these individuals are protected, including Mahmoud Khalil, who the Trump administration is currently trying to move to deport.
Yes, in fact, trying very, very hard as we speak. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you very much.